Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ODL development tutorial. So it's going to be myself. I'm Raghurama Bhat with Cisco, and Ed here. Ed Warnicke has been with OpenDaylight for a long, long time. So he's all the questions should go to him. So just to get you started, in case you don't have a USB key, please grab one. It's right here, and start copying the contents, because it's going to take a while to set up the environment, because we are giving you a full environment. So we'll be using VirtualBox or VMware Fusion. Somebody had asked about Parallels. Might work. I have not tried it with Parallels. But we are giving you a OVA, a Ubuntu OVA with the complete environment setup. So you don't need anything on your laptop instead, other than just having enough memory and CPU. So it's a 4 GB, requires 4 GB. And inside that, we have got everything, like the Java, Maven, the IDs, everything that you require is in the VM. So that's the best way to develop. Of course, you are free to kind of start cloning the environment on your own laptop if you are comfortable with doing that. But that you're mostly on your own in terms of, but to help with that, we have put a M2, the Maven repository, as a zip file. So it's part of the content in the USB key. You could be using that to kind of set up the Maven repository, initialize it on your setup. So while you are doing that, let's just kind of get started with the initial kind of introduction, what the goals and how we are going to go about doing this today. So this is going to be a very hands-on tutorial. We'll be going through several development exercises, starting with the very, very simple, the classic hello world in OpenDaylight, and progressively making it more and more sophisticated. And along with that, like I said, will be Ed has a lot of experience with this, so he's going to kind of show about not kind of what are the best practices, why we do certain things the way we do them, etc. And so at the end of this, you would have written a complete plugin, which is fairly comprehensive. So before we get to that, just the basics. Most of you probably already know about this. So Java is the programming language we are going to use, at least today. Any JVM-based language probably could be used, but today we are using Java. Maven is the build system that we use. OSGI is the runtime. And that gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of dynamically, loading and unloading the features, automatically loading the dependencies that you need, etc. And starting from Helium, Karaf is the OSGI container, and all our distributions are based on Karaf. So I assume the content is getting copied, and any issues, feel free to kind of raise them. This is very interactive. I'm kind of going through the slides just to kind of kill time until you're done with the environment. So we'll be getting started as soon as everybody's environment is set up. Okay, so this diagram or something similar to this, you probably have seen many, many times if you have looking at ODL. So you have the standard kind of the southbound plugins, which are typically the protocol plugins to talk to the network elements. And then you have the network services, which could be the base ones like the topology and inventory, or it could be something that you got from someone else, like an additional functionality, like say service function chaining or group policy, etc. And this is where something that you build as an application would go as well. And then the REST APIs are automatically generated for you. So this is the high-level structure. So although this slide is showing it this way, like some kind of the REST APIs on the top and then the services or applications, and below that you have the service adaptation layer and then the plugins. In reality, as you will see as you're developing, the view is more like this. So from the system point of view, the southbound plugins are no different from the northbound plugins. It's really just by convention. We call something a southbound plugin if it is a protocol adapter and if it is talking to the network element. And we call something a network service or an application if it is talking to more of other applications you might be integrating with. And they're all primarily interacting with this service abstraction layer. And later we are going to be going into a lot of these details as to what exactly are the interactions, what the conceptual overview of how you define the interfaces of your module, et cetera. But this is just to give a high-level view. So the gist of it is that you are just writing to the MD-SAL, and you are exposing an interface that the rest of the plugins or rest of the applications can access. And everything else is quote unquote taken care for you. So what are those things? So plugin A might be communicating with plugin B. That might be in the same controller instance or in a controller cluster deployment. It could be on another node. That is taken care of for you. You don't have to worry about that. And say today we support the Java-based plugins, or you could have been external application accessing the system and the interfaces that you have developed through REST. How do you generate those interfaces? That's also taken care of for you. Whether you want to access the data and the functions in a flexible DOM way where you're not really bound to a specific language interface, or you want to generate more efficient, more useful Java interfaces, that's also up to you. Again, we'll be getting into the details of all this. So the MD-SAL is giving you 2 or 3 key functions. One, it is a broker. So when plugin A is communicating with plugin B, the MD-SAL is taking care of the translation of the messages and taking it to the destination and converting it back. And like we said just now, the other plugin could be in the same JVM or the plugin could be somewhere else. It's also a tree-like data store where you can store data, whether it is configuration data where that defines the behavior of your application, or it could be operational data that you are maintaining for the runtime state of your system. All that's maintained there. The data, again, it's all transparent to your plugin, but it could be persisted. If it's configuration data, it will be persisted. If it's operational data, it will not be persisted. And in a cluster deployment, it will be replicated, and you can access it from any node as well. So the tools we would be using, this is the lingua franca of OpenDaylight development. And so all you need really is just a text editor, but any IDE like IntelliJ or Eclipse is going to make your life a little easier. And in the OVA, you have both, so you can take your pick and use the IDE you are comfortable with. We are going to be using Yang as the modeling language. What does that mean? So when a plugin has an interface that it exposes to the rest of the world, that's how we are going to describe it, whether they are the data structures that you are making available, or the functions you are making available, or the notifications your plugin is going to generate. All this will be described in Yang, and Ed is going to give you a kind of an overview or a primer on that as well. So Java, either 1.7 or 1.8 will work. Maven is the build tool, and like I said, OSGI and Karaf as well. So what are the benefits with Karaf? So very powerful kind of hot deployment. The controller could be up, and you could be deploying a new plugin without initializing the controller. the very powerful configuration mechanism where you can dynamically load new configuration. Very powerful kind of shell access that you will see today as you are kind of looking at the logs of the plugin or grabbing that or seeing which features are loaded, what does that feature depend on, et cetera, et cetera. And although we'll not be getting those into today, like it's a powerful security framework as well. And basically any component can be packaged as a Karaf feature bundle, and any jar can essentially be packaged. And this again is mostly taken care of for you by the tooling that we are going to be providing. Okay, this kind of shows the very high level view of what you do when you're building a MDSAL application. So like we already said, you're starting with the Yang model. So Yang model describes the three things: the data model, the functions or methods that your plugin exposes, and the notifications it generates. So you start with that, and the tooling generates the Java equivalents for those. So you will see the corresponding data definitions, Java interfaces, etc., that correspond to what you have. And in terms of the good development practices, the best practice, typically an application would be divided into the API interface and the implementation. So correspondingly, we package it such that it is a API bundle is one and the implementation bundle is another. The idea being you can, of course, separate the two and have multiple implementations for the same interface. Again, just to kind of reiterate, all this is automated for you, as you will see that all you need to do is to run the May1 build command. So you will then have your implementations that correspond to the Java generated interfaces, and that gets the implementation jar. And in Karaf, you need a third item, which is basically describing the features that are available and the feature dependencies that your plugin or application has with the other Karaf features. So those are described in a feature.xml. So all these get things put together, and we can generate optionally a car file which is an archive which combines all these jar files and the feature XML. So with that, I assume at this point everybody has the environment, at least the contents copied into the laptop. If someone does not, please grab a USB key from here. Okay. I am going to be using VMware Fusion because that's what I'm most comfortable with. And the ODL OVA has been tested with both. Yes, question? Yeah, my slides I just updated. I will make it available. The few slides that I just showed, the other majority of the slides that Ed is going to talk to is already online. I'll be showing that page. I'll be bringing that page up, and you will get that. And I will add my slides there as well later. Yeah, so let's start by importing the OVA. So I assume once you, from the USB key, I would copy all the content, but then expand the ODL tutorial.zip. That should have two pieces in there. One is the OVA, which, like we said, should work for both, and the M2 repository. This M2 repository you would need only if you are going to not use the OVA and maybe set up the environment on your own laptop. Only then you would need it. So if you're not familiar with it, I would not recommend it right now. You can always use that later. So right now let's import the OVA. Yeah. So if you are already at the stage of you booted up the VM and you need to log in, the password is ODL/developer. While that's happening, we can bring up the wiki page we are going to be using. So does everyone know how to get to the OpenDaylight wiki? Yeah. So, okay, in case you don't, just go to wiki.opendaylight.org and search application development tutorial. That should be on your badge on the back. What? Who is doing that? Luckily, I have one version which was already loaded, but. Okay, I think that was. Okay, that was temporary, I think. It went in. Yeah. No, VirtualBox and VMware Fusion we have tested. The parallels, somebody asked about parallels. That's the one we have not tested. You should be free to use, between these two, yeah, you can use either one. How many folks have the kind of OVA brought up? I mean, I know if somebody has started earlier, you probably would have finished. Or how many people are not ready yet? Okay, well, we'll wait. It should, I mean, you're using which one, VirtualBox or? That should. Take a look, so there's a little icon up at the top where you can enable the network. No, it should be wired network as far as the VM is concerned, because it's going through the bridged network. The wiki page? Yeah, the wiki page, go to wiki.opendaylight.org and search for application development tutorial. That's the easiest way to find. Sorry, didn't get that. So you go to wiki dot, let me just do that here. I don't know why this comes. Huh. This shows up once in a while. Okay. And then you search for application development tutorial. Yeah, I mean, if I refresh it, then it kind of goes in sometimes. Yeah. Okay, see, now it's going in. No, what I searched was within the wiki. No, I was doing the search within the wiki page, not the Google search.
So is everyone able to get to the wiki page at this point? Who is?
Not
from the VM. Okay, but from your primary machine, can you get to the wiki page? Okay, good. Is there anyone who's having trouble getting to the wiki page at this point? So from the main page, there's a search box in the upper right-hand corner, and you can search for application development tutorial.
Yeah, I think you refresh the page, it seems to go in.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, sure. This, the ODL-developer. Application development tutorial. Yeah.
Login and password are the same?
No, the login I think should be preset for you. I think it says ODL dev or something. Let me kind of show it when it's. So ODL dev is the login username, and ODL slash developer, I'll put that up. That should be the. Yeah, 1 second, yeah.
I'm going to wander around a bit and see where folks are at. You feel free to read it, but yeah. Pause there. So how's everybody doing getting all this slow? It's 8 p.m.
How many have the VM booted up and are able to log in at this point? You're able to log in? Okay. Okay. Which one? Yeah, should be. For this thing? Yeah. Yeah. Interact with the other audience. Yeah. Let me put that up. Yeah. Yeah. Let me put that up. So we can use IRC for, interacting amongst us. So this will be the IRC channel, OpenDaylight tutorial. That should be, you should be able to use any client. Sorry, what's the question? IRC client, we don't have it on the VM. I guess you could use a browser-based. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, you can use a browser-based IRC client. IRC Cloud is good for that.
Yeah.
It gives you IRC is lovely. If you're going to participate in the OpenDaylight community, I highly recommend it. Everybody pretty much lives on IRC, OpenDaylight. It's quite lovely.
So are we going to need to get to the internet from the...
No, you shouldn't need to get to the internet from the VM. have the information here in terms of getting to the wiki page? Is everybody at the wiki page at this point? Is there anyone not at the wiki page? Okay. Maybe what we could do is actually start talking through a little bit the agenda for what we'll be doing.
Sure.
Just to give people a sense of it. Do you want to bring up the wiki page?
You want to do? Yeah, I can bring up the wiki
I'll just
page.
talk from here for
You
the
can,
moment.
yeah.
Cool.
When to start, you can.
Excellent. So this is not nearly as much fun until your development environments get up. But effectively, what we're going to be doing is, I'll walk through the table of contents quickly. So we'll start, we have something called a Maven archetype, which you can think of as a template for new projects in OpenDaylight. And it brings in all kinds of the nitpicky, magical things that you don't want to have to learn to do by hand until you need to tweak them, which is something you're going to want to do much later, if at all. So we'll use that to go ahead and create a project that you can build immediately, that you can run immediately, and that you can immediately see do something and chase it back to where the code is telling it to do that. It's very simple, it's just a log message, but that shows you where the entry point is in the application, which is always one of the most important things you need to identify when you're first working in code. Once we've done that, we'll take a moment together, we'll import it into Eclipse, the application that we've built, because Java is a much more pleasant language when you're working at an IDE. IntelliJ is available as well. Eclipse has the nice side effect that there's a really good Yang IDE in Eclipse that's already pre-installed for you. And then we'll go look, once we have things in the IDE, and we'll see where the log line that we saw when we ran it came from, as just a starting place. Then we'll go through and we'll talk a little bit conceptually about Yang tools, the MD-Sal broker, RPCs in OpenDaylight, how they're handled. And after we've talked about those conceptually for a bit, which we may actually do here in a second while you guys are moving through things, getting a development environment set up, then we can start looking at doing a model for a very simple hello world RPC application in OpenDaylight. So we'll do that model, we'll use that to generate Java code, because the vast majority of the code that you're going to be working with is going to be generated for you from the model. We'll see how that mapping works. We'll go through and do an implementation then of that RPC as an exercise. And all the things that are labeled as exercises on the web page, those are things that we will be doing together, probably in pairs, just so we can get folks working together. Open source tends to be very social, and everything works better when you're working with other people. We'll show you one of the nice things about being model-driven is that you get, not only do you get the Java code for free, the REST APIs for free, but there's even a user interface that keys off the models, Yang UI, that you can use out of the bat to have a user interface for the application you've generated. Then we'll go through, use that to manually test the RPCs. We'll talk a little bit about how to do debugging, because how many of you have used a Java debugger before? Okay, how many of you have used any kind of debugger before? Right, so with debugging, the tricky part always is how do you turn on debugging in a convenient way for the application that you're running. Once you've got that done, you're good. And so we'll show you how to do that with Carafe for when you're running the application. And then we'll move into actually writing integration tests so that you can know that you haven't broken the damn thing as we move forward. Because integration testing is how you lock down that things are working. We'll show you how to debug those integration tests. It turns out that the on-ramp for that is kind of tricky, but once someone shows you how, it's actually not hard, and that makes it much more pleasant to figure out why the hell your integration tests are not working. So we'll go through and do that. Then we'll start moving into the data store. The idea with the application here is we'll start with a simple hello world. You send an RPC with a name, it comes back and it says hello, whatever the name was. Then we will start keeping a record of who has come in and making this RPC call in the data store. So you'll see the accumulation of the greeting registry, the people who've come in and the greetings you've given them as an operational matter. Once that's working, we will make a configurational matter out of it, so you can configure different greetings for different people. So we'll be doing all of that. And again, we'll be going through doing manual testing with Yang UI so you can see it working. I know I always feel better when I see things working, and then writing integration tests for them so we can make sure they stay working. Going through all of that, custom greetings. Then we'll talk a little bit about data change listeners. In OpenDaylight, it is possible to subscribe to information about the, about the change of the data in the data tree at a reasonably granular level. And we will be using that to improve the way we do integration testing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get there. It has to do with the possibility for race conditions in an asynchronous world. And then we'll talk a little about transaction chains, which are a mechanism for managing very asynchronous transactions coming in, keeping them in order and working properly. And then we'll also look at reworking things to be fully asynchronous at the end. So that's sort of the general agenda. How is everybody doing getting their environment up and going?
All ready? Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let's take a brief pause. We'll wander around real quick and see if people need help. And then I will probably just start going into some of the initial conceptual slides to talk you through some of these pieces of where we're going, if people are not ready to go.
Okay, that should be okay. Because what we were trying to do was to set up a vagrant environment inside. It should be.
Oh, there's no man page. The Java people don't do man pages, and they're allergic to nroff. I know.
I mean, what way are you trying?
I'm with you. I learned a shell script from man pages.
Hey, Ed, he's getting a VTX not enabled, which comes for the nested virtualization, but do you get that error with VirtualBox?
No, I don't. So VTX not enabled, is it?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it makes sense that VirtualBox does not support it, but.
Yeah, but we're not even using it.
Yeah.
It looks like somebody's turned off virtualization entirely on your machine. Possibly. Yeah.
Oh, into the BIOS.
Yep. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
No worries.
Maybe you can see. Maybe.
I don't think it was something obvious that you go like turn on.
I think your laptops are similar, so maybe you can follow what he's doing.
It might be if you reboot.
Could you go help him since you've been down this road before? I understand. It's a best effort.
Go help him screw up his BIOS.
Yeah, VTX at the BIOS level. So it doesn't load any of the VMs.
Yeah, because without the VTX,
Yeah.
it's only 32-bit.
Yeah. Okay. Again, I mean, at least the whole thing is on the wiki page, so you should be all set for. Just make sure you have the USB key, and you should be able to do it. Yeah. Yeah, makes. Yeah. And asking someone questions if you can. Importing.
Yeah, for some reason I'm having trouble with it.
Oh, importing the VM.
Yeah, I was having a little bit of difficulty re-importing my own OVA file.
Okay.
So I'm going to reboot and see if I'm going to try. Okay.
You want need to. I mean, so when do you want to do?
As soon as this reboots, I'll start talking a little bit. So, quick question: who here is to the point where they have a booted VM? Who here is to the point where they have a VM that is booting up, where it's working? Okay. Who here is still in the process of importing a VM? As in, you've got the OVA file unzipped and you're importing, right? How many folks are still unzipping? Okay. And how many folks are just stuck even before the unzipping or how many folks are copying off the USB key? Okay. And how many folks are just completely stuck? Oh, okay.
Oh, you don't have enough space.
Ah.
We should have.
In my case,
You have to clean up space.
you just needed to turn on the Intel.
I hadn't thought of that.
Makes total sense. Makes total sense. Okay.
That we have tried that type of thing, it kind of becomes difficult because then you get access
Yes.
issues. If we can do it, this is.
Yes.
Yeah, we have tried that in different setups.
I'm sorry, the what?
They're giving VMs on the UCS for everybody.
Oh, so there should.
Double click on the DEB and
There should be a deb file there. The other thing is it should be, vaguely recall that there is an apt gettable. If you go to VirtualBox for the download for the Linux page, they give you apt get instructions. So just Google for VirtualBox download,
Oh, the
and there will
format
be
issue?
instructions for Linux that will
yeah.
include like an apt get information on how to apt get it. Installing strange deb files
Yeah,
is always
somebody
sketchy.
else was having Linux issues
Okay.
with the exFAT format. Okay. Yeah, no, I will pair you. No, there isn't. But somebody else was going to create a copy or something.
Let me bring up the slide again with the password for folks as they're coming up.
You had the issue with the exFAT thing, right? You were able to get past it. You have a new USB with it, or I mean, look, someone else is having the same issue. Okay. What do you need to do?
apt-get install exFAT fuse and exFAT utils.
Okay. Oh, it's on the wiki. Okay. Yeah, so you basically have to install the
Okay,
exFAT
cool.
support on your Ubuntu.
Excellent.
They said somebody added it to the wiki page now. So maybe go to the wiki page if you have it. Somebody added that just now, I think. That's what maybe refresh the page or something. Yeah, sorry.
But I'm getting a new Mac.
Basically, he did sudo apt-get.
Still comes with 256
Did somebody add that? Somebody told me.
don't give
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Totally.
basically,
All right. So real quick, yes.
to add that support basically to your Ubuntu.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, maybe if you get it, you could add it.
Details. Oh, VTX is disabled. So this is the same problem that gentleman had, and evidently you need to go into your BIOS and turn on Intel virtualization. So the hardware support for virtualization isn't turned on right now.
I think it's EX. I mean, he has it. You can ask. You can ask him. He has it. Just see. Yeah, this
ODL,
gentleman.
it's
He did it.
ODL developer, dash developer. Pardon me, sir. We've got a woman here who's having the same problem with the BIOS. Could you help her along? Thank you.
EXFAT dash fuse.
Okay. So how many folks now have an OVA booting or have a booted virtual machine?
On the wiki. I didn't see it on the wiki. Maybe.
Okay. So I'm going to start moving forward a little bit and start trying to get us moving on some of the demo stuff. So let's go ahead and start in on getting a first project going.
Okay. Oh, it's in,
Do you mind really if I use your VM, Raghu?
you can. But
Okay, thank you.
Fusion.
That's fine. You have a really long timeout on the menu down here.
But if you need yeah, just should be. Oh, you.
The website first, and then we'll look at the VM.
So I have
Yep.
it is just. So I will just.
Spaces. Okay, cool.
The command and.
Oh, perfect. Cool. So, so starting at the beginning, we're going to be doing exercise 1. So is everybody at the wiki page at exercise 1? Because life is going to be much easier if you can copy paste things at places. So for exercise 1, can everyone read the screen for exercise 1 as we're going along? Okay. So what we're going to do basically is you're just going to cd into the Git directory, and we're going to run the command that you see there, which you're probably going to want to copy paste. And that will run what's called the Maven archetype. And then you'll be asked a series of questions, and you can see the recommended responses for them below. So if you guys have virtual machines up, you can go ahead and start doing it. Actually, let's do the following, since we've got some people working and some people not. So the folks who've got their virtual machines up, could you raise your hands again? Okay, so for those of you who don't, if you could find a friend who you don't already know who has their hand up saying they've got a working virtual machine, so we can follow along together, and go move over, sit next to them, and let's work together. Let's take a few minutes, introduce yourselves, get names, that kind of stuff. So, and continue along, speak up when you either get stuck, go ahead and raise your hand and speak up, or if you actually get to the end of exercise 1, go ahead and raise your hand and speak up so we can kind of track how people are doing.
I need to unplug once.
Sure, sure, go ahead.
Just 1 second, I need to do something. I'll get it back soon.
You have no idea how crazy that's been driving me.
Which project should I download if I want to use other VM, Git clone?
So you have the, no, you don't have your build controller. So you should have, there should be an m2.zip file.
Yeah, I copied already.
You just unzip that to your m2. So you don't have to download any project. Just follow the instructions for exercise 1, run the archetype, and it will create a project for you.
Oh, it will. Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Happy to. What can I do for you? So you need to go into your BIOS and turn on your Intel virtualization instructions.
Yeah.
Yes. Hang on a second. I've got someone who I think has just got networking.
So
Yes.
version value?
I mean, I don't know whether
That's
it matters
interesting.
too much, even if you don't change. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, you ran it with SNSU. Interesting. Click on the little Wi-Fi thing for a second,
Major, minor, and I guess revision. I
and
don't
click on Enable Networking. Let's see if that makes any
know. No,
difference.
it's saying that this is the default. Instead, use.
Shouldn't. It should all be in .m2 and you're running -NSU, so it shouldn't actually. Okay. So you're already building. Try hitting Control-C and starting again. I don't know quite what. Okay.
It's basically what.
VM was running before mine.
No.
Okay.
When
This is the tricky part about live tutorials. Yes,
I
actually.
was doing.
Could you help him get his VX instructions, his virtualization instructions going? Yeah, you were having the problem with the virtualization instructions, and someone helped you to turn them on? Yeah. Yes. Uh-huh. Sorry, what? No, you need the hot M2.
Okay.
You'll need this hot M2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your thinking is totally rational, but you will.
Okay. Like if you are on the key page.
Yeah.
Anybody
it's basically
else?
expecting you to.
Yep. Do you need something?
Oh,
Here, let me wander around your direction.
These are the values.
those
So
are the
Argo,
value.
Argo OpenDaylight hello.
Oh, okay,
hello.
okay, got
Only in some case you can just hit enter.
No, not
the thing.
copyright or
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
That's strange.
So basically just keep pasting.
It is zipped up in there, so hang on. Can I help you? Go to exercise 1.
Said it's shift insert.
Oh, I forgot to mention how to get the terminal up.
Paste.
So go here
Using the prompt.
and type in terminal,
Yeah.
You will work with this.
and you can select terminal and get a terminal up.
I guess you have to do.
So
Yeah. Should do it. Cool. Yeah, and same thing for all of them.
okay, good. That's working.
Hey. How are you? Good to see. Yeah, pretty much.
Any luck?
And
What? Okay. Oh, you think you're finished already?
I mean,
Awesome. Cool. So you've seen the logs, scroll down. Scroll down.
some of the meetings.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
to, maybe I'll talk to you later after
I know, Thon. I should have used Docker.
for our section.
Yeah, but yeah, you may not need all the things at once, but it's good to, yeah, I mean,
Yes.
it depends on how much, I mean, maybe just spend today, like see, during the weekdays, I know, keynotes if you want, you can
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
skip.
So
Interesting.
Yeah, well, Thursday and, see, what I would think, Thursday and Friday.
Let's not get to any of these
for actual
characters.
ODL, who are contributing to ODL, and there'll be more deeper design discussions. You may not want that
Really
either.
strange.
I think day after tomorrow.
Can you bring
afternoon,
up, it's complaining about
where more the
line
developer-centric
18,
ones.
line 33, column 18 of that file. Could
Yeah,
you bring it up real
exactly.
quick? Yep. Artifacts pom.xml.
Yeah, I know, I understand.
This time
Yeah.
it's not possible.
Yeah, so it's complaining
I will
about
also be trying to see what I can.
artifacts
I
pom.xml.
also cannot afford to be fully 5 days here.
This way, like I would go to the.
Yeah, I also.
Things all of a sudden, Chandra asked you on
Ah,
Friday.
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Line 33, character 18.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I don't think you need to be here all
All the days.
I think it's especially mornings is just
Yeah, character
you
18.
don't need to be there. Should be okay.
Okay, tomorrow, maybe tomorrow I'll.
What did you give it for a project version?
Yeah.
After this, like,
More develop. Yeah, like right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the schedule is there, right? So you can.
Okay, so 1-0 snapshot.
I think no, just search for.
Oh, that
just
is not going to work.
submit it.
You need to use everything after the colon. Yeah. So you can go ahead and delete your hello world, run the archetype again, use the stuff after the colon.
Mornings.
Cool. That would explain everything. It's very, very unhappy with the colon in the middle of your version.
Demos, what these things might be, I think would be good. That's my thinking. So that you're.
Oh, so for these, you're just hitting enter. You're accepting the defaults. Cool. All right. Excellent.
I would suggest that.
How's everybody else doing?
And the Thursday, Friday are more like ODL, rather than ODL users, ODL contributors. And we are discussing what we will do in Beryllium, that kind of thing.
okay.
And some of them are more internal. You could,
These guys came to a
Yeah.
meeting, right?
right. So you guys, you might like that, some of those things.
Like in,
Selected ones. But yeah, this will be more internals of the code. They would be talking more about how to use and all that.
So, folks, we've had a number of places where people have gotten stuck at perfectly rational, normal places. So I was going to walk through this a little bit briefly for you, just so you can see. The first one is if you don't know how to get a terminal in Ubuntu, there's this icon in the far left-hand corner. If you click on it, it will allow you to search for things. If you type terminal into the search box, it will bring up a terminal application. You can click on that, and that will bring up a terminal that you can type in. We had some folks who perfectly normally got stuck there.
Plenty. We have 370 gig left, right? Oh, space field is not PCC. We need an additional. 730.
And then for those of you who are sort of stuck along the way,
Nothing is. That's
I feel like that is very big, but it looks
no,
like
the
very big.
no the. You're, you only have one drive, C colon, right?
yes, that would also work.
It's about 10.
Any shell will do.
So I don't know.
Um,
Maybe
Oh,
track
okay.
to some other direction.
no worries, it's all good. So and then you can run the archetype.
See, it's huge. Can you see how big it thinks it is? Like the right click in size or info or something? Yeah. No, you don't. Okay, you could actually see. You don't need to. You extracted it.
Then the value for the group ID is org.opendaylight.hello.
Copying the zip. Yeah, maybe you could copy.
Artifact ID is hello. Version is 1.0.0-snapshot.
No, so wait.
And then take the default values for package just by pressing enter,
No, so now
and for class prefix by pressing enter.
you need to copy again, right?
And then you can enter whatever copyright suits your fancy. I'm amused by using Yoyodyne.
Alright. No, so where did you show? Where did you show the OVA right now?
I just clicked it. It's in there. Yeah.
I mean, if you want, you could just see. I think normally you wouldn't.
And it will go through and generate them.
I think it's extracted on this.
And then you can CD into hello and begin building. Do use -NSU though.
Looks like you already have it extracted.
So quick show of hands. How many folks have been able to run the archetype so far and generate a project?
Put that now.
Okay. Looks like a little less than half of folks. How many of those folks have been able to build the project? Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, it'll take a little while to build because there's an intricate test to make sure that the OSGI wiring is right, which it is, but you got to check. And so how many folks have been able to run Carafe and see the log message? Okay, so we're still moving along. Cool. So for the folks who are stuck, who have not been able to get the archetype building, what's got people stuck? Yeah? Let's take a look.
And
Maven version.
Did you run it with -NSU?
okay, so it's using the wrong May one.
Let's see. Okay.
We
This is my.
Don't run as root.
One local.
Yeah.
We need see
Yeah,
that.
don't run as root. That will not work. That's your problem. Don't run as root.
You shouldn't. You're trying to.
Yeah,
set up
guys,
for your own-
don't run as root. It's bad hygiene and it won't work in this case.
No, you don't. No, what I mean is, if you're using the VM, you don't need.
Okay,
to just
other
empty.
folks who are stuck.
Normally, I'm able to compile regular.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Get the new employee.
He has updated some of the archetype, like when it's not merged yet. So I think that's why you need that too.
Command line, scroll down. No, back up.
Then you shouldn't need. You don't need to. Yeah. If you use it on that guy, it's all set.
Or it's a classic Hello World tutorial.
It starts out very classic.
Doing it on
It's
your
not
laptop
great.
is more advanced users.
So it is improved Hello World.
It is improved Hello World, yes.
It's just, no, down. It's the first NVN statement that he says, I'm thinking that. First
What's
place
the
that he
dragon then
shows
about?
CD to get, and then
What?
What's the dragon then about?
Then that tells you.
Oh, I don't know.
And I need to find the person who subscribed me to Keynote without talking to me.
What's different in mine?
Martin didn't mention that. Tony, you have a lot of speak sessions. I wouldn't notice that I am on Keynote.
Yeah, here.
So who is the lucky guy?
Control tutorial.
Very interesting problem sometimes. I don't know, it's a Windows machine thing, I think. Somebody copying. It's saying, I have only 436 gig free. You need 732 petabytes or something.
Yeah, no, I've seen that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't show the file sizes.
Okay.
You have
All right.
the file size here. It doesn't show.
Yep.
I'm not
Strange. Why?
I believe these things were created by some software which corrupt.
How long is it going to
Corrupted
take till
the
I see
thing.
this?
Yeah, it was obviously
You
created
should,
on.
it should be there
Linux
already.
or
You see hello
Mac,
provider?
I'm sure, probably.
Oh, okay.
Hello provider session initiated.
So I should exit.
Yep. Well, Control C will take you out of the tail.
Are
And then
you
you can
able
type
to
shutdown
extract or
dash
you're
F.
not even able to extract? Same issue somebody ran.
Control C. Yep. And then shutdown dash F. Yep. Yep.
Now, I didn't understand some what's happening in the background here. I'm going to explain what's going on.
So at the end, I've got the walking through all the magic step.
Okay, but for now it's okay.
For now, yeah. I mean, I don't want to lose people. We're actually trying to sort of move forward and get things going. But yeah, Totally.
The gal.
My pleasure.
Is over there. Let me check whether she's
Okay.
able to get past it or not.
yes.
This is really fine, this is taking its time, but if you guys can remind us, you had this slide where you showed the different stages. We are going through those, right?
Oh, the.
Did it work for you? Not yet. I think he
Oh, okay.
had the
You mean
Windows,
the slide that Raghu showed with
had
the
a
overview of
similar
stuff,
issue?
or the sort of.
Oh, in the copy.
Oh, yeah, the website. Yeah, the web page. Let me bring that up. So it's actually there on your wiki. It's exercise 1, then exercise 2, and
I
so
think
forth.
the copying
Yes.
something went wrong.
Yep.
Actually, like the zip, the USB stick itself seems to have expanded. It won't fit probably.
Hey, as long as it's still running.
I think when you
Yes?
like he seems to have expanded on the stick.
Yep.
That
So just
might have corrupted.
click yes. Yeah, just click yes to accept them. It's prompting you and saying, hey,
No, it shows
that
it
right?
on the decoder.
Goes through. Now you've got your project. So if you cd into hello, you'll see the
This one-
subdirectory.
this is the shit-
and
this-
you can build it.
Yeah.
Let me grab the different one.
Yes.
It is corrupted.
Yeah.
I'm not using the Windows zip software.
You look like you're happily building.
Maybe.
Cool, cool.
Windows zip folder is corrupted.
Yeah.
Broke it already.
Okay.
I know. Yeah. I'll put it back up on the screen. It is on the wiki page, by the way. The username is in setup instructions on the wiki.
Normally 4 GB should be.
Okay, so really quickly, how many folks have actually seen the log message at the end and are done with exercise 1? Okay, we're getting some. Good.
Like this.
How many folks have successfully run Carafe? Okay. How many folks have successfully built? Cool. So is there anyone who's stuck at some point where they can't even get the archetype to run, whether it's loading the VM or something before that?
Okay, there are one.
You're stuck? Let's see what we can do to get you unstuck.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's still ongoing or do.
Password on the VM is ODL developer. It comes up automatically with the username.
Then there is another prompt.
Okay.
Then
Oh, you're SSHing it or
If
something.
you saw, no, you should probably.
It usually comes in it should come up to the graphical login.
I was trying to run the shutdown, but I have to wait for the prompt.
Okay.
So then
What did you did log colon tail
log,
or?
yes, I did a log and column tail, and
Okay, then I think
saw
you
the
should be
message.
able to. Yeah, you're okay because it was just tailing and waiting. It was just waiting since the log tail. I mean, I actually.
Did you get the graph up and going?
You can also, instead of log tail, I use log colon display.
It's not necessarily going to be the last one though. So if you look, hello provider session initiated.
Just grep for what I want.
Yep.
That's probably easier instead of tailing.
It just didn't happen to be the last thing that happened. This is the problem when everyone shares a log.
This is better, so that way you're just back into the prompt immediately instead of tailing because you're just continuously waiting.
oh, tailing, it's not.
You're just waiting. It is.
actually
It's the
use
same. Yeah.
continuous tailing,
Yeah,
waiting
that's
for
what
the
it was doing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Instead of, I think grep. Yeah. Yeah.
No worries. Yep. Yeah, we've had a couple of people seeing that with Windows where it's basically. Oh, that's different
Oh,
actually.
actually, that is the thing. You can do Yeah,
But
you
it-
can do Control C at that.
Yeah,
point
yeah, no.
because,
Like there are a couple of people for some reason there's some extractor on
what it is,
Windows that
yeah,
is seeing this as like a
waiting.
multi-petabyte file.
So do not use Windows zip.
No, actually,
System?
let's try.
Tony will save you.
Instead of tail,
Help him get it.
you do
Yes.
log colon display
Let me take a look.
Yeah.
Let's see.
and pipe it to grep.
Oh, so you already have a
do that
subdirectory hello, probably because you ran the
You
archetype
went
before.
fast.
So just remove the existing hello directory, run the archetype again, it'll be fine. It's just complaining that the directory's already there. Yes.
Sorry, what are you doing? 'Cause
Modular the normal
Like
sorts.
the pipes, I'm grepping. It's like Linux command, like regular commands will work, so you can pipe it.
Show me.
Pipe the
Yep.
pipe symbol.
yeah, the trouble is,
Sure.
you've got a US keyboard mapping on the image, and I don't have a US keyboard, so
Okay.
I've always got to try.
I
and
need
figure
the
out
pipe
where
symbol.
the,
I need this.
No, it's
Yeah.
over
So
there.
what you would do is get the M2
Logic
file
display, pipe
Grep,
to where?
grep
and
for help.
unzip that
Grep.
into your local .m2. So you have that. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. The OVA was
I
like
tend to
for
do
people who
this
didn't have anything
instead of
going.
the tail.
And
so
I
that way
knew there were going to be some people who are like, I don't want that. I
You're
have
good.
my own
Yeah, you
comfortable
already done.
environment. And like, okay, that's fine.
So
Just
you-
take my freaking
The other thing I
M2.
was going to ask,
Right?
running
Thank you.
this
Yep.
on Ubuntu, VirtualBox, because the
Right, if you have a development environment that's got like the right Maven and JDK and everything like that, and Eclipse and whatnot, you can take the m2.zip and unzip it
Here, you mean?
into your .m2.
Inside the VM.
This is the VM.
I didn't do
This
Oh, you got it.
we got everything
machine.
up and running, but that's
So I've got no,
just skip two prints.
What
Even there 2 lines doesn't
see what
come.
I'm
That
saying?
hello
I've got
message.
no
hello.
decoration on any of the windows. I've got no.
So do the following.
Basically-
Hit Control C
I have. Yeah, I see it.
and do log::display.
I have run it.
No,
I mean, actually, Ed runs it on VirtualBox.
grep-i.
On
Everyone
but
runs it on
not-
the VirtualBox, but there is a difference that
Hello.
VirtualBox on the Windows and on the Mac
Gotcha.
actually supports
You got it. Let me actually do that here
graphic,
for folks.
3D graphic environment, and Ubuntu 14.4 or 15.4.
Sure.
But it is showing graphics though. Like it's Windows
It
sizes.
requires
I think we have extra USB sticks, yes.
And the Ubuntu
I don't have a Fedora.
Does not.
VirtualBox doesn't
Yeah, I'm
support
sorry.
3D graphics emulation.
Yes.
That's why you don't have that.
I'm sorry, what?
Okay.
I know.
It's an ODL tutorial.zip, yes.
Much faster it will be working on your Ubuntu and not using VM at all.
You are, but let me show you an easier way to
Yeah, you
see
could
it.
use the M2 repository
Right,
and
so
directly.
hit Control C and type log::display.
There is not, but what you need is the M2 zip. Right? As long as you have the right Maven and
Then pipe it to a grep-i hello.
yeah, so Maven 3.2,
Yeah,
and then you
I totally get it.
have your
Trying to type with one hand in a cast has got to be murder.
on the zip.
Actually, what
So then you will have a populated M2. Then you can run the archetype, and that's all you need.
Try hitting enter and try again.
also we are distributing purple.
It'll complain, but there we go.
Yes,
So log::display.
it's on the stick. It's on the same zip.
It's not only in the VM.
Correct.
Display.
Yeah. It's outside the VM. It's just on.
And then pipe it to a grep-i hello.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, so you can use.
And I'm actually going to show that up here right now. So
dot
folks,
M2.
there are a bunch of people who are looking at the log tail, which is the most immediately way to see the logs, and they're getting a little bit lost because there's a lot of logs there. And it's not necessarily the last one, which is kind of what you'd like it to be. And so let me go ahead and show you that running here. So one way to look for this that's a little bit more direct, especially once you've got it running and you're sort of staring at the logs going, oh my God, I've got to hunt through the logs, is log::display grep-i hello. And I'm still coming up so it doesn't show up here, but if you do that, if you've come up for a bit, you have to hit Control C to get out of the tail. Then you'll be able to see the log message come up. So, okay, real quick check. How many folks have got Carafe running or have seen the log message? Okay, we're doing pretty well. How many folks are still actively building or actively running the archetype, and it seems to be working right now? Okay, cool. So you guys should hopefully be good to go in a few minutes. How many people are stuck? Okay, could we get some folks over to help the folks who are stuck?
Okay, he had
So this is what the log message looks like from the log display when you finally get there, by the way. Cool. All right, so who else was stuck?
Okay, doing that. Okay, yeah, just pipe it.
No, you're not troubled. You're trouble. Oh, we're in a BIOS. It's even more trouble.
Yeah.
So,
This is an old PC. I brought a nice old PC that I love.
okay.
All PC should be low.
That is
If you don't have the virtualization instructions, you
needs
probably are going to have issues.
4 gig.
What about just running it in the
Unfortunately. You could try. I mean, we can try. Reduce the VM.
Yeah, if you've got like the Maven and Java stuff and you unzip the M2 to your M2, you should be fine.
Shut this
That's
down,
entirely why it's there,
reduce the
actually.
settings to say
Like,
2
I figured there'd be a population of people who had no development environment, and the OVA would be the fastest way to get them going, and there would be a population of people who were really happy with their virtualization environment, and for those people, like just unzipping the M, like Marcus probably just wants to unzip the M2.
reduce memory. Yeah, reduce this to say 2 gig, 2048, and then.
I can get it all the way to the point where the booting Ubuntu, but then it just freezes.
saw this thing bump up twice now, this OpenDaylight thing. But see, it's still going. Is it like a
did you do?
purposeful test in the middle or something?
No. What command did you run? The tail minus F?
No, this is just
Okay.
still in the middle of building, right?
Okay.
And it shows that
me take a look.
OpenDaylight thing.
Yeah, there are some errors that do
That
come through the
might be
logs.
because you're
So-
running some tests or something.
Yeah, they're
Like
harmless.
it runs
So, yeah, but if it
like
gets to the end of the
unless
build,
you
then you can go try and running the
do
carafe
skip tests
and
or
look for that
something.
log
It
message.
runs the tests.
Yeah,
So
I
as part of
didn't
the
skip
test,
that.
as part of the test, it's probably showing that. So let's see. It should hopefully slow, but work.
Okay, let me see.
Yeah.
Errors. Can you scroll up a little? It usually gives a more detailed complaint above.
And if that works, maybe type 3 instead of if 2 works.
Summarizes
type
the Scrum so it tells you everything.
Like if 2 GB
sliced about the org.
works but slow, maybe you can try bumping it up to 3 gig, since you have 4 gig on the machine.
Weird. I would try rerunning the integration test to CD into IT and do a maven-n
Yeah,
clean install, because that looks like something just got grumpy in a bizarre way. Okay, so, yes?
I think this is going unsafe. I mean, like, are we following this procedure? See, I have to button.
On Freenode, I don't know. I don't use that. I will use
Okay,
RC
yeah,
Cloud.
we'll be following this.
Okay, so, folks.
You can do it. Yes, you should
I
be able
think
to, yeah.
most folks are through exercise 1 at this point, and so you should have a working hello world.
Or whatever time.
Is that the case? Because if so, what I'd like to do is actually walk through importing into Eclipse. So I'm going to go ahead and shut down -F my running carafe. I'm going to move my terminal window so I can see the icons again. There's a Eclipse J2EE icon. And you can double click on that and it will launch Eclipse. Oh, actually, before you do that, I forgot one important detail. So if it comes up, hit cancel. You're going to want to go to cd/, // your home directory, and remove the workspace subdirectory. There was unfortunately some stuff that should have been removed when the OVA was shipped that wasn't. So do remove that workplace subdirectory before you launch Eclipse, and then go ahead and launch Eclipse. And it will come up and ask if you should use home ODL dev workspace, which is perfectly fine after you've deleted it. So whenever you've got that screen up there and are ready, you want to click the OK button to select that workspace.
Yeah, what thing I'm using, you can check which Maven it is using.
Yep.
Is it using
Yep.
that
So,
system?
quick show of hands, how many folks are to at least this place getting Eclipse up and going? Okay, we'll give folks a couple more minutes to get to this place.
Because I know in IntelliJ, IntelliJ comes with a built-in Maven, that is 3.0, but it needs to use the systems VM. This is systems Maven, that will work.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to build it from inside Eclipse.
Yeah, basically, it's the default that comes up. So you don't have to type it in. It's the default value. You just click OK when it asks you about the workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK so we can move on. It will keep launching Eclipse.
Yeah, it should be on the desktop. Maybe when you minimize the VM, it should be on
Yep.
the
I'm sorry, what?
Is there like a specific GIF for the tutorial that we can pull?
Sadly, no.
That
would make sense. That would make so you can unzip the m2.zip file though.
Sure, that's
onto
what I'm
your
going to
M2.
do.
Yep.
And
Is
then
it
that should
going
contain
better?
all the stuff.
That contains all the stuff.
All right,
It's a hot M2. Yep. But still, run SEO.
Well, yeah, I mean, it might swap. I don't know if we have a swap set up or something, but
Okay.
Before
So
the
when
people-
Eclipse first comes up, it will offer you all kinds of tutorial-ish things. You just want to click the icon in the upper right that takes you to the workbench. So just click this icon that takes you to the workbench.
what do you need? It should be.
All right, so how many folks are to the workbench so far? Okay, we'll give it a few minutes for folks to get here, and then we'll start walking through the import process. Yes?
Space minus RF space workspace.
Oh, you have to use at least a Maven 3.2 something. 305 is way too old. So you could download and install a more recent Maven. Okay, quick show of hands. How many people are at least to the Eclipse workbench? Okay, it's getting better. Good. We'll give it another minute and then we'll move forward. Okay. So what you want to do is move your cursor up to the top of the screen and let it hover. That will bring up the menu. This confuses me every time I go back to an Ubuntu desktop. I keep forgetting this part. So move your cursor to the top of the screen and hover, and you'll get the menu. And you want the file menu, and in particular, import. So that's the item that you want to select, file, import. And when you selected file import, it will bring up a dialog which will give you an insane number of options as to things you could do to import projects. You want to select Maven and expand it, and select existing Maven projects. So existing Maven projects is the one that you would like. Yes? It's the default one that it brings you. So just take the default for the workspace. Oh, remove /workspace.
It's in the workspace directory and home directory.
Okay, so is everyone to at least this screen? Let's see who's to at least to this screen. Okay, we're getting there, cool. So click next.
Yeah.
And it will ask you, then click browse to decide where you'd like to import. Click up to ODL dev.
It is normal.
And then drill down into get hello. So you want ODL dev get hello is the thing you'd like to import. And once you've got that, if you click OK, it will bring up a dialog that will list all of your sub-projects. This should look somewhat familiar. You've got your API, your impl, carafe, features, artifacts, and IT.
Sure.
And as soon as that is good for you, click the Finish button. And it will begin thinking deep thoughts. If you look in the lower right-hand corner, it's telling you the percentage progress on importing Maven projects. And if you look up at the Project Explorer, you can see it start to bring in the folders for your projects.
It's going to recreate it, yeah.
Yep. Carafe is used in a ton of stuff. It's increasingly the most popular OSGI container out there. It just does a lot of nice things for you. And it's maintained by very friendly people. Yes? So just up to the top of the screen and hover a little bit below the menu bar. Like a little bit, oh, I'm sorry, no, all the way up to the top of the screen. Sorry, I misspoke. And file. No, not the file for the VM. See the gray one? Yep, there we go. File, import.
What's the path again to the import?
ODL, get hello.
ODL dev, get hello?
Yep, ODL dev, get hello. Yep.
Already in the hello, yeah, you should do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you will get this screen where Eclipse is basically complaining that it has a very strange relationship with Maven.
You should be able to click.
And just click Finish when you get there. And it will complain to you that it doesn't know about all the Maven plugins we're using. Eclipse and Maven have an interesting relationship. Maven has a bunch of plugins that do the build. Eclipse, if it doesn't have a corresponding Eclipse plugin that knows about the plugin that's doing the build, becomes confused, and it doesn't really break anything. It just complains a lot about being confused. And what it's complaining about is it doesn't understand one of the plugins that we are using to the build. So just accept that error, click OK, let it think for a while.
Ed, when do you get that message? Import.
Yeah,
When do you get that? I mean, right after you import it?
right after you start importing the project, yes.
Okay, it's still doing it, yeah.
Yep.
I think if you click there, I think if you click there, I think it shows at that it shows. I guess you did it in the background or something.
Okay.
That might be. Yeah, I think this is the same thing here that he's showing.
And then go ahead, I would suggest unclicking the check style plugin. I've had some unfortunate experiences with it, complaining about things where it just doesn't like the style checking for no particular reason. I appear to be following its rules. And click next. And I remember, this is the point at which Eclipse becomes confused. This installing of additional plugins. So if you just click cancel, everything will still be okay. It will just complain about your POM files. So everything still builds, everything's still editable, all the features that you really want still work. And so you should have this list of projects on the... You don't have to have it. It seems grumpy about getting it installed. They have a collision of two modal dialogues, which makes it get stuck. So, but if you just click cancel, it will move on and things will work. So how many folks are to this point where you've got a list of projects down the side? Okay, we'll give it a few more minutes for folks to catch up. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep, hello. Yep, and just click OK.
It's target. You probably don't want the target. You want one level up.
Oh yeah, you don't want target. No, you just want hello. There's nothing in target for it to do. It gets very confused.
Maybe you should highlight that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go up to get. And highlight hello. There we go. Now click OK.
Yeah.
There we go. Cool. Anybody else stuck anywhere? I'll be right. Yep.
Okay. He said basically you can ignore it. You can like when it's giving the errors, you can cancel it and you're still okay.
Oh, it's so good to see you. It's been, what, a year and a half or so? It's good to finally meet you in person. Awesome.
No, disable. You don't need that.
If you've got an existing environment, you can unzip the M2 into it. Yeah, okay. Anybody else stuck? Yep. This is normal. So if you actually were to drill down, it's not complaining about anything in the code. It's complaining that there are POM files that it doesn't understand plugins in. And that's annoying, but not going to break anything. Which I keep correcting, and then it keeps breaking as new plugins get used. So no, I totally, yeah. Okay, so about how many folks are to this place? All right, so let's go ahead and move on to exercise 2, because now we've got these in there. So if you go look at exercise 2, oh wait, first actually I should do the conceptual thing. Let me go grab the slides, and we'll talk a little bit about conceptually what we're going to do next.
It is in there if you want.
Oh, you've got?
Yeah, your slides.
Oh, you got my slides?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Excellent. That's even better. All right, now I've got a mic again, too. Ah, perfect. Thank you.
This one, right?
Okay, cool. Did somebody have a question real quick before we started the conceptual bit? Yeah? I'm sorry, what? Oh, so Raghu can step down and help you. So conceptual stuff. So we're going to start out in exercise 2, we're going to be doing some modeling in Yang. We're going to build a model for our Hello World RPC. And so it's a little bit helpful to talk about what is Yang tools, what is Yang. So Yang is a modeling language. It allows you to model your data semantics and also your model semantics and data organization. The models in Yang can be augmented, which is an amazingly cool thing because it means that you can actually extend applications without having to necessarily change directly the source that's dealing with those models. So without having to change the underlying model, I can add additional augmentations to it. We won't go so much into that here. We've got a lot of stuff to cover. But it's a very cool feature of Yang. So what you can model with it is, you can model data as a tree, and you have basically two trees that roughly mirror each other. One of those trees reports operational data. One of those trees reports configurational data. So if you think from a network point of view, one tree would be where you say, I want this interface to be up. The other tree would show the actual state of that interface. It's actually up, what are its stats, that kind of thing. And this way you can understand very clearly what is the user intent and what is the actual operational state of your system. And this turns out to be massively useful as you get deeper into problems in controllers. You can model RPCs, which is the first thing we're gonna do, remote procedure calls. It can model notifications. The Yang language itself is text-based, tends to be very simple and very compact, and it's standards-based, RFC 6020. So cool things this allows us to do. Being model-driven and using Yang means that we can generate Java code from Yang, and we'll walk through and take a look at that Java code here in a second. It provides codecs that will convert from those generated Java code to a DOM format, which can then be used to generate XML and JSON for REST. This allows us to automatically have REST conf interfaces, so you get REST without any effort at all. And it's REST that operates the same way. How many folks here have ever used a REST interface where it violates its pattern all over the place? Where you're sort of going along going, what the hell was the guy who wrote this binding thinking here? How many people have had that experience? Okay, evidently it's just me. It also gives you netconf bindings, and there are other bindings that are coming as well. We've got someone working on AMQP bindings right now, which I'm really excited about for message buses. And the nice thing about the way these bindings are handled is because they're done in a model-driven way, when a new binding comes along for OpenDaylight, every application in OpenDaylight becomes available to that binding by default. I mean, you can restrict it, but by default it becomes available. So benefits of having Yang generate those Java classes. So it turns out that when you're generating Java classes, particularly data transfer objects, DTOs, there are certain characteristics that are incredibly valuable to reliably have. A really strong one off the bat is immutability. Because if I have immutable data transfer objects, they can't change. If they can't change, I don't have to worry about locking behaviors around them because they can't change as they pass across threads. The likelihood of human beings successfully generating immutable data transfer objects reliably across hundreds of human beings is approximately 0. By doing it in a model, and when you do it wrong, the highs and bugs are unbelievable, right? You sort of look at it and go, why the hell is this broken? By generating those Java classes, they are immutable every time when you generate them from the model. This also allows you, by generating them from the model, to produce things that are very strongly typed. One of the things that's nice about a strongly typed system is that it catches an incredible number of errors just because you're passing the wrong kind of thing in the wrong place. So rather than having things break at runtime, a whole lot of things just break at build time. I had an experience early on where I had this very disturbing situation where 3 times in a row, my code simply worked the first time. And I don't know how many of the rest of you have been in that position, but you sort of look around like something's about to fall on your head. And a lot of that was because of the strong typing. You get consistent interfaces. They're the same everywhere. The conventions are always the same and they're always followed because they're generated. They're also improvable. One of the things that we had very early on in OpenDaylight was we had a truly miserable two-string function. It was terrible. And someone came in and said, your two-string function is terrible. And it was like, okay, great, write a better one in the code that generates the Java. And suddenly, as soon as that went in, every single two-string function in the entire system from the generated code was improved. And so you can get these immediate global improvements that would have represented man-years of effort if you were doing them by hand. They would have been unthinkable to try and do by hand. At best, you would have gotten inconsistencies in how you handled to string. And because we're generating from models, we get that. And of course, we've already talked about automated bindings. And there's also some really cool magic that's fairly deep where it can actually do runtime generation from models that it discovers dynamically at runtime. So really quickly, the MDSAL basically is a collection of 3 brokers. There's the data broker, which basically allows you to store things and get notifications about the data tree when it changes. There's the RPC broker, which basically maps RPC calls from where they start to where they're going. And there's a notification broker where you can publish notifications and people can subscribe to them. We're gonna be talking initially about the RPC broker because that's the first thing we're gonna do. So what the RPCs are basically is they're unicast messages. So it allows you to send a message, receive a response. It's all done asynchronously. So you'll see as we get into the code, the stuff I was talking about in terms of reliably generating code that behaves the way you want to, all the things at the interfaces between things that allow asynchronous behavior, they're always there, they're always right. Now you may not implement them correctly, but in terms of you may have a synchronous implementation, but the interfaces between you and everybody else, they're always in the right shape. And this can be done without having knowledge of the implementation that you're using. When I go and I call an RPC, I have no knowledge of who's implementing it, nor should I. And then you've got two flavors of RPCs in OpenDaylight. One is what we call global, which means there's one and only one person registering to provide that RPC. And then there are what are called routed RPCs, where there's a context that gets registered with it. So a classic example of this would be you would register an RPC for flow programming, and it would be registered with a context that is a particular node. So there might be different implementations of a flow programming southbound plugin for different boxes you're talking to, but you don't know as an application, it's not your problem, you just call the RPC and say which one you want to flow on, and it goes and deals with wiring that up. So just gonna walk quickly through some sequence diagrams so you can see sort of how these fit together. So sending a message synchronously this way. So you start by getting the hello service. So you have some session, and we'll take a look at that here in a second, and you call get RPC service for the service you want, and you get back an instance of that service. It happens to be a proxy, but it's not our concern. So a hello service instance comes back to you. Then you can make a call to that service. Now, there's this thing here called future. I should probably talk briefly about futures in Java. So do you guys remember when I was saying that all of this stuff can be done asynchronously? When you have asynchronous behavior, you need to be in a situation where when someone asks you to do something, you don't have to completely finish the job before you hand them back their handle to get their result and go on with your life. Because it's possible that some of what has to happen there takes a long time. It involves I/O, it involves things traversing networks, it involves slow boxes taking their time to respond. You don't want to have to sit there and block your caller while all that's happening. And the standard mechanism for doing this in Java is something called a future, which basically just says, hey, you can ask me if I'm done or not. You can ask me to block you until I am done, or you can in other ways interact with me so that when I am done, for example, there are lots of features that let you do callbacks. So you can say, when you're done, call this guy, and that gets taken care of. So futures are really lovely for this purpose, and when you make a call, you always get a future back. So we get back a future. In this case, I'm just going to be synchronous about it, so I'm going to call what's called future.get, and that just says block me until you have a result. So we call future.get. Somebody who's implementing hello service sets the output, at which point the get returns to us as a consumer, and we go on with our life. So did that make sense to folks? All right, so now we're gonna talk about how it looks asynchronously. In the asynchronous case, we start pretty much the same way. We start with getting the service. So we get return to handle that points to that service. Once again, we do our call, we get back a future. But instead of blocking on it, we wait to see when it's done. So we say, okay, while the future is not done, we're gonna do some other work. Usually you'll do something much more complex to do this, but this sort of illustrates the point. So we check on is done, we get told no, we're not done, so we keep going through the loop. Eventually, hello service sets the output in the future, at which point we get true for is done, and we proceed to do whatever we were going to do with the result. And that allows us to have asynchronous calls. So you're not forced to deal with them asynchronously if you're not ready for that. Often when you're just trying to get your functionality going, you kind of want to rush through, but that's available to you as you start trying to ramp up your performance. So again, this is the other side of it. This is what an implementations, yes, there was a question? Yep. Absolutely. So in the simplest case, the application pulls for it to say, okay, is it done, is it done, is it done? If you're using more sophisticated features, you'll sometimes have callback mechanisms available to you, that sort of stuff. But in the simplest case, and it's the easiest one to explain, you would pull to say, okay, am I done? Does that answer your question? Good. So this is what it looks like when you implement a global RPC. Please keep in mind, as a consumer of an RPC, I have no idea if it's global or routed. It's not my problem. But if I'm a global RPC, this is what message processing looks like to me, which is I implement the hello service. So I've got some kind of a constructor. That constructor registers saying, hey, MDSal, I implement this. So I do an add RPC implementation call. And I also then implement something that actually implements the hello world service itself, where I do whatever it is I'm going to do to construct the output. And if I'm going to behave synchronously here, I just return a successful result wrapped in a future already. So I don't actually do any funky async games in this example. This is the simple way to just sort of get going. And then on the consumer side, it looks exactly like what we described the last two times. I appear to have this slide twice. Apologies. Question? Okay. So for async processing, again, it looks the same. I implement the service. I register with the MDSal. What looks different is the way I handle my implementation. So for my implementation, I basically just simply say, okay, I'm going to have some settable future. That's the thing I want to return. And I'm going to send it to some other thread for processing. Apologies for the overly simplistic examples, but you can draw pictures about them. So it gets sent to some other thread for processing, and I return the future. Then subsequently, when I'm done processing it in that other thread sets the result for that future. And that's how you would process asynchronously on the implementation side. And a simplistic example. You do more sophisticated things in practice. Everybody with me? So because we're running a little behind, I'm going to skip routed RPCs for the moment, just because they take a little bit of explaining, and we're not going to be doing them right now in the tutorial. And I think probably it's best for us to move on to exercise 2. So can everyone bring up exercise 2? So in exercise 2, we're going to model a simple hello world RPC. And this is pretty straightforward. I recommend that you do this in your IDE. The Eclipse IDE that you have there already has loaded in it a Yang IDE, which gives you syntax highlighting, the proper indentation, all kinds of other good things. And what we're basically going to do is you have this file already, but you're going to be adding to it this piece, the RPC hello world, where you're just going to say, hey, my inputs just have a leaf, which is a name. You know, its name is name, it's a type string, and the output is going to be a leaf we're going to call greeting, and it's got a type string. So if you guys could go ahead and do that, and then you're going to want to rebuild your API directory with maven-nsu clean install, and that will rebuild and generate a bunch of Java code for you. And once we get everybody there, we'll walk through the resulting Java code a little bit so that we can actually take a look and see what generated Java code looks like here in a simple example. Was there a question, or? Okay, cool. So I'll wander around the room, Raghu will wander around the room, we have other experts in the room, and we'll get this going. Yep. Yeah, I just it didn't look quite like that, but just say resolve. There should be an OK button at the bottom.
Now I think you can.
It just looks like it's being clipped. There we go, finish.
It seemed like you ran into problems building those.
No, yeah, that's what.
It's usually, but yeah, click OK. It's just going to be very grumpy about your POM files. Your code should be fine. Yeah, you see it says Maven configuration problems, Maven problems.
It was trying to
Your code itself is fine.
Trying to install those.
Oh, that was the one other thing I wanted to show you guys, and it is in the instructions, which is where the entry point is
From Eclipse
in the code.
There.
And from Maven it will be what?
Yeah, the MEN minus NS.
I'll do it after you guys have done exercise too. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah. Same thing. I sometimes also do can do minus capital D skip tests. I kind of to speed it up a little if you want.
Yep. How can I help you?
You changed the YANG file, right?
Yep, yep. So it's just this is just the thing I was saying where it's complaining about the POM file because there's nothing wrong with the POM file, but Eclipse, if it doesn't have a corresponding Eclipse plugin for the Maven plugin, it doesn't know what to do, and so it says, "Hey man, you're on your own. I think this is broken because nobody told me about it." So you're absolutely fine.
If you had to run this on in different environments,
Yeah.
15 different
Yeah, it's that modal dialogue. You got a modal dialogue that's complaining about one thing and a modal dialogue that asks you to do another, and it gets very, very stuck. Modal dialogues are evil. That's exactly the right thing. You did exactly the right thing. Yep. Well, you've already imported hello into Eclipse, right? And we've talked about the YANG tool, so that's the piece. Yep, exercise 2. Cool, yep. Well, let's figure that out then.
You have to build the project again from the
Moving the workspace
We
directory?
can, yeah, either way. I mean, if
That's okay. So
you
exit
can do it
Eclipse.
From the CLI also just
Eclipse is wonderfully robust about the world not being what it is
yeah,
today.
you can do either way.
In a very, so exit Eclipse,
Yeah, I use more IntelliJ, so I
and
don't
then
exactly here. But
go to your home directory,
yeah.
and then you went to rm-rf workspace. Yep, and then just relaunch Eclipse and proceed through the import process. And if you get stuck, grab me, grab somebody. There are a lot of folks who've done this, so.
Yeah.
No, I saw that, and that works fine for Yang. I'd claw my eyes out if I had to do it with Java.
I don't. I do it from IntelliJ,
Yes.
so I don't know exactly. I think you should be able to do right click at the hello aggregator. I think. Yeah. I think you should be able to do.
Yep, good.
I can build something.
So go to Hello API, and if you right click, there's a refresh, which will tell it to, hey man, there should be some new files. F5 works too. Yeah. Except that you've got brightness set to it, which is why I usually tell people to right click.
I mean, I do.
There we go. And then if you look in source main yang gen south.
I mean, because I use.
Yep. Then there's a bunch of classes there.
Check with.
Yep. And feel free to start taking a look through them if you like.
You right click on the in Eclipse. How do you build from the project?
I don't usually. I usually build from the
command line.
I usually build from the command line.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can, and like I think we have some people in the room who do. I just don't happen to.
Yeah. Yeah. That I do.
I didn't forget you. I promise.
If I'm using minus NSU.
That's not good. So my suggestion at this point would be exit Eclipse, go to your home directory, rm-rf the workspace directory, and launch Eclipse again and try re-importing again. That's probably your best bet. Cool.
How do I get back to
Yeah, you just go into a terminal and you can execute that. Yeah.
just a minute. I'm in a terminal.
Yeah. So you go to the hello where you the one that you.
So you'll be amused by this, Tom. Someone just asked me, so how would you build this from within Eclipse? And I'm like, no, it's just for the Maven build. I know you do a lot more stuff in Eclipse than I do.
But no, you're going to.
Like you do your good stuff in Eclipse, right?
Yeah, either way. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I do.
Okay. I was. I do the command lines for builds too. Yep. Click cancel.
Cancel here.
Yeah. And then once you click cancel, you can say disable.
tutorial design.
I know.
It's hard to learn with the new things.
I know. But they're actually doing really well. It's going
Yes,
well.
it's going.
Once we actually got the VMs to boot,
Yeah.
everything's been okay.
It's going much better than what I was afraid of.
Don't fear.
But it's been
For
good.
the future tutorial,
Yes.
on the next summit, we will build a Docker Southbound plugin. Or something useful, not Hello World.
I intended to do something
He
useful.
wanted
There were
to
some.
do that.
I wanted to do something useful, among other things. The lack of notifications made it tricky to do a DHCP. You have real events there. Yep.
So this is all great. What I personally feel that I'm missing is how does all these things tie together? Like if I want to write an application and I want to create a new RPC, what files do I have to change? I mean, you provided us with the framework and everything is working.
Right. So you built the project. So we're kind of moving that direction, I think. Let me run it by you and see if it's actually what you're looking for. Because what we're doing right now is we've done the model, which is going to give you all the generated Java code for the RPCs.
So, but how did we build the model? That's the part that we never.
Oh, how did you decide what to put in the model?
Right.
Ah, okay.
So you have the Yang model, but what do I need in the Yang model, and do I need a Yang model if there is an existing Yang model in ODL?
Yeah, that will depend. So basically, if there's an existing Yang model, it actually does.
So you want advanced tutorial.
Yeah. you basically want something that's a little bit more on the modeling side, and part of the reason.
I just want an advanced tutorial. So okay, eventually what I want to do.
So there is an answer to that question.
Oh, I know.
And
There's actually really good tutorials on this actually already.
I don't like the
core
toaster.
tutorials.
Don't tell me
Not
about the
the
toaster.
No, toaster.
I hate that. I hate the toaster.
I also didn't do coffee machines.
No.
You can do something.
And you should mention that advanced tutorials which start dealing with the plugins which actually do something
Yeah.
are in the core, hosted in the core tutorials and are building on top of these tutorials. So this is basic knowledge. And then in the core tutorials, there are tutorials like, okay, here I designed this model for the RPCs, I changed it file, or okay, we have a model which is from the ITF, and we are going to implement that functionality.
Or I want to create my own model for some reason.
Yeah, so there are tutorials like this.
They're available on the ODL website.
It's
it's on in the core tutorials project.
I mean, I think we've had various people running around at the IETF like every several times a year, giving tutorials on how to build models and that kind of stuff.
I mean, it's a big deal. I go to IETF.
Oh yeah. So you've been in these sessions.
The Yang doctors are there, and
they're treating everyone.
You will trust them. You will trust them.
Don't trust anyone who brings you enums. Don't trust Yang doctors bearing enums.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you is, what we want to do at Oracle is to be able to get a notification when you get a TCP send packet, for example. How would you go about designing something like this? So we want a notification every time a new TCP connection is set up.
Oh, so Solaris?
Well, on ODL.
Anyway, I'm going to wander around a bit.
But it depends what.
It depends on what the southbound is.
Will be.
It depends on what the southbound is. Like, are you talking about getting a packet in from OpenFlow?
Or TCP connection to the controller?
We want we have to.
Okay, real quick. How many folks are to a place where they've made the model changes, they've got Java code generated? How many folks are there? You guys are getting faster.
How would we know that?
Oh, so the next thing we're going to do is walk together through the generated Java code. So if you were able to make the model change and your API subdirectory built correctly, it built successfully, then you should have what you need so we can move on to the next step and take a look at the resulting Java.
Yeah, so that we are going to do together now.
That's what we're going to do together. Yes.
I have a developed application in OpenDaylight. I have seen there is not anymore provide consumer in this archetype. Is this for a specific reason, or?
So I'm mostly just doing the provider stuff. You can have a consumer still, that's still available. It's just, it ended up being more confusing for most folks.
Yeah,
So
consumer has been finally removed, right?
it's still around. Oh, it's not in the archetype. No, it's not. It's been removed from the archetype, but it's still in the system. It's available to you, but it's not in the archetype.
Yeah, it was confusing the consumer.
It confused a lot of people, so I stopped talking about it. All right. Raghu, can you unlock?
I guess I should disable that. disabling the locking. So let me do that.
Don't worry, we can take care of that during the break. Let me just walk people through. Okay, cool. So really quickly, for folks who have not completed exercise 2, I'm going to do it really quickly here. I agree. I'm not going to object to that suggestion at all. So I drill down into, and most of you have already done this, that into hello.yang. I paste in the fragment for the RPCs. I save. I bring up the terminal. I cd into get hello API. Maven-NSU clean install. It does the build thing. And we see that build is successful. So when I go back to Eclipse, just to make sure I'm up to date, I can right-click on Hello API. Pick refresh. You could also use F5 if you're not using it for brightness. And then I look in the source main yang gensal directory, and there's a package in there. And the package is actually related to the module name. So you'll note that there's a module URN. And so this package always starts out org OpenDaylight yang gen v1. That's just telling you information about the generation. And then you can see we got URN, OpenDaylight, params, XML, NS yang hello in both cases, dot the revision. So you can literally read the module URN information off of the package and vice versa. If you've got a lot of it going on, that can be helpful. And then we've got these files generated. I'm going to skip past the things that start with $sign for the moment. So we've got a hello service that's been generated. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. And I will make it big. And basically, we've got some nice, well-generated documentation. And then it's not very complicated. It says, OK, this is an interface for hello service. It extends the RPC service interface. And since we only have one RPC defined, which is the hello world RPC, that is created here. You know, the input is a hello world input. We get back a future for the result for the output. Not very complicated. Does anyone have questions about that? OK. So the question then becomes, OK, well, what do we end up with for the input? So if I look at hello world input, it's also an interface. It's not a concrete type. It's an interface. It extends data object, and it is augmentable. And we won't go into augmentations just now. There's a little bit of information as hinting to help the system that's processing it. And then it just has one method that allows you to get name, because that's the only leaf that we have for the input. So we have an interface for the service and the input. Likewise, we have an interface for the output. Very similar. It's also a data object augmentable, and it has get greeting, because that's the kind of leaf we have. So if we go back and look at the hello yang, we had a hello world RPC. The input has a leaf name, so we've got the get name on the input. The output has a leaf greeting, so we have get greeting on the output. So you've probably noticed by now there's not a single concrete class yet in any of the stuff I've talked about. It's all interfaces. The concrete classes come from the builders. So for the input, we have a hello world input builder. So real quick question, show of hands, how many folks are familiar with the builder pattern? OK, we should probably talk about that a little then. So remember how I said that you had these immutable objects? That once you had a data transfer object, that it couldn't be changed. And this gave you really desirable threading properties when you were doing high-performance systems. And so when you step back a little bit and think about it, the question then becomes, how do I create these immutable objects? And you basically have two choices available to you for creating them. Either A, you have something like a constructor where you have to provide every single parameter at once for that thing. Now, in the simple example, it wouldn't be a problem for us, but in a complex example, that's really painful. Or you use what's called a builder pattern. And the builder pattern is a mutable object. It has the same sorts of fields as your eventual immutable object. So you can set name, for example, on it. You can set whatever fields you have. So you can accumulate all the information wherever you need to in your code. And when you're ready to actually use it to generate your immutable object, you call .build. It's a very straightforward pattern for constructing objects of this type. You can use it places other than creating immutable objects, but that's the way we're primarily using it here. Yes? Mm-hmm. We're collecting all the information we need to build it, but we're not building it until you call .build. But the builder object itself is an object. So I can say, give me a builder, because I could have 3 of them, right? And could set the values for each of them independently. So they are actually objects that then have setter methods available on them, and getter methods. And you can see sort of how we lay this out here. There's actually relatively a lot that goes into it. There are a lot of convenience methods present, but essentially it gives you getters and setters, gives you various constructors you can use along the way. You can do things with augmentations. You've got the build. And the actual implementation is done as a private static final class inside the builder. So there literally is no way, other than using the builder, for you to instantiate it. It's the only way to do it. And so you've got this very controlled pattern for creation of objects. And so this all gets handled here. It's also where you get things like the two string functions. For those of you familiar with things like hash codes in Java and equals in Java and the intricacies of getting those right so you get the right comparisons, that's all being generated so it's done correctly every time. So that's where most of the meat of things is. But even though you use them very often, you don't usually look at the builders. And there's a similar builder for hello world output. So any questions? We're actually, I think 10:30 is the break. Is that correct? And it is exactly 10:30. So are there any questions before we break? Yes? So typically with a factory pattern, what you're more concerned with is not so much the accumulation of pieces, but the selection of who's going to do the building. You're producing a sense of abstraction from how it's constructed, as opposed to an accumulation of the information that's used for the construction. You also can get some of that abstraction from what's constructing it from a builder, but usually you don't use it that way. So it's less of, I know actually I really do want it constructed by this guy this way, so I don't really need a factory pattern for it. But I do want this accumulation behavior and give me my object at the end. So that's the distinction there. And it's like anything with patterns. When you deal with patterns, there are often these very fine distinctions. I have a dear friend of mine who's a really, really deep pattern guy, and we have a standing argument as to whether aspect-oriented programming is a formalization of the observer pattern or the decorator pattern. And I don't even remember which side we're on at this point. But it could be either one, depending on how you want to look at it. So are there other questions before we take break? Awesome. I hope to see you guys back after break. So enjoy the cookies.
How long is the break?
I have no idea. Okay, so come back at 11.
I'm going to be using VMware Fusion because that's what I'm most comfortable with. And the ODL OVA has been tested with both. Yes, question? Yeah, my slides I just updated. I will make it available. The few slides that I just showed, the other majority of the slides that Ed is going to talk to is already online. I'll be showing that page. I'll be bringing that page up, and you will get that. And I will add my slides there as well later. Yeah, so let's start by importing the OVA. So I assume once you, from the USB key, I would copy all the content, but then expand the ODL tutorial.zip. That should have two pieces in there. One is the OVA, which, like we said, should work for both, and the M2 repository. This M2 repository you would need only if you're going to not use the OVA and maybe set up the environment on your own laptop, only then you would need it. So if you're not familiar with it, I would not recommend it right now. You can always use that later. So right now, let's import the OVA. Yeah. So if you are already at the stage of you booted up the VM and you need to log in, the password is ODL/developer. Loading and unloading the features, automatically loading the dependencies that you need, etc. And starting from Helium, Karaf is the OSGI container, and all our distributions are based on Karaf. So I assume the content is getting copied, and any issues, feel free to kind of raise them. This is very interactive. I'm kind of going through the slides just to kind of kill time until you're done with the environment. So we'll be getting started as soon as everybody's environment is set up. Okay, so this diagram or something similar to this, you probably have seen many, many times if you have looking at ODL. So you have the standard kind of the southbound plugins, which are typically the protocol plugins to talk to the network elements. And then you have the network services, which could be the base ones like the topology and inventory, or it could be something that you got from someone else, like an additional functionality, like say service function chaining or group policy, etc. And this is where something that you build as an application would go as well. And then the REST APIs are automatically generated for you. So this is the high-level structure. So although this slide is showing it this way, like so kind of the REST APIs on the top, and then the services or applications, and below that you have the service adaptation layer and then the plugins. In reality, as you will see as you're developing, the view is more like this. So from the system point of view, the southbound plugins are no different from the northbound plugins. It's really just by convention. We call something a southbound plugin if it is a protocol adapter and if it is talking to the network element. And we call something a network service or an application if it is talking to more of other applications you might be integrating with. And they're all primarily interacting with this service abstraction layer. And later we are going to be going into a lot of these details as to what exactly are the interactions, what the conceptual overview of how you define the interfaces of your module, etc. But this is just to give a high-level view. So the gist of it is that you are just writing to the MD cell, and you are exposing an interface that the rest of the plugins or rest of the applications can access. And everything else is quote unquote taken care for you. So what are those things? So plugin A might be communicating with plugin B. That might be in the same controller instance or in a configuration mechanism where you can dynamically load new configuration. Very powerful kind of shell access that you will see today as you are kind of looking at the logs of the plugin or grabbing that or seeing which features are loaded, what does that feature depend on, et cetera, et cetera. And although we'll not be getting those into today, like it's a powerful security framework as well. And basically any component can be packaged as a Karaf feature bundle, and any jar can essentially be packaged. And this again is mostly taken care of for you by the tooling that we are going to be providing. Okay, this kind of shows the very high level view of what you do when you're building a MD cell application. So like we already said, you're starting with the Yang model. So Yang model describes the three things: the data model, the functions or methods that your plugin exposes, and the notifications it generates. So you start with that, and the tooling generates the Java equivalents for those. So you will see the corresponding data definitions, Java interfaces, etc., that correspond to what you have. And in terms of the good development practices, the best practice, typically an application would be divided into the API interface and the implementation. So correspondingly, we package it such that it is a API bundle is one, and the implementation bundle is another. The idea being you can, of course, separate the two and have multiple implementations for the same interface. Again, just to kind of reiterate, all this is automated for you, as you will see that all you need to do is to run the May1 build command. So you will then have your implementations that correspond to the Java generated interfaces, and that gets the implementation jar. And in Karaf, you need a third item, which is basically describing the features that are available and the feature dependencies that your plugin or application has with the other Karaf features. So those are described in a feature.xml. So all these get things put together, and we can generate optionally a car file which is an archive which combines all these jar files and the feature XML. So with that, I assume at this point everybody has the environment, at least the contents copied into the laptop. If someone does not, please grab a USB key from here. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ODL development tutorial. So it's going to be myself. I'm Raghurama Bhat with Cisco, and Ed here. Ed Warnicke has been with OpenDaylight for a long, long time. So he's all the questions should go to him. So just to get you started, in case you don't have a USB key, please grab one. It's right here, and start copying the contents, because it's going to take a while to set up the environment, because we are giving you a full environment. So we'll be using VirtualBox or VMware Fusion. Somebody had asked about Parallels, might work. I have not tried it with Parallels. But we are giving you a OVA, a Ubuntu OVA with the complete environment setup. So you don't need anything on your laptop other than just having enough memory and CPU. So it's a 4 GB, requires 4 GB. And inside that we have got everything like the Java, Maven, the IDs, everything that you require is in the VM. So that's the best way to develop. Of course, you are free to kind of start cloning the environment on your own laptop if you are comfortable with doing that. But that you're mostly on your own in terms of, but to help with that, we have put a M2, the Maven repository as a zip file. So it's part of the content in the USB key. You could be using that to kind of set up the Maven repository, initialize it on your setup. So while you are doing that, let's just kind of get started with the initial kind of introduction, what the goals and how we are going to go about doing this today. So this is going to be a very hands-on tutorial. We'll be going through several development exercises, starting with the very, very simple, the classic hello world in OpenDaylight, and progressively making it more and more sophisticated. And along with that, like I said, will be Ed has a lot of experience with this, so he's going to kind of show about not kind of what are the best practices, why we do certain things the way we do them, etc. And so at the end of this, you would have written a complete plugin, which is fairly comprehensive. So before we get to that, just the basics. Most of you probably already know about this. So Java is the programming language we are going to use, at least today. Any JVM-based language probably could be used, but today we are using Java. Maven is the build system that we use. OSGI is the runtime. And that gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of dynamically controller cluster deployment. It could be on another node. That is taken care of for you. You don't have to worry about that. And say today we support the Java-based plugins, or you could have been external application accessing the system and the interfaces that you have developed through REST. How do you generate those interfaces? That's also taken care of for you. Whether you want to access the data and the functions in a flexible DOM way where you're not really bound to a specific language interface, or you want to generate more efficient, more useful Java interfaces, that's also up to you. Again, we'll be getting into the details of all this. So the MDSAL is giving you 2 or 3 key functions. One, it is a broker. So when plugin A is communicating with plugin B, the MDSAL is taking care of the translation of the messages and taking it to the destination and converting it back. And like we said just now, the other plugin could be in the same JVM, or the plugin could be somewhere else. It's also a tree-like data store where you can store data, whether it is configuration data where that defines the behavior of your application, or it could be operational data that you are maintaining for the runtime state of your system. All that's maintained there. The data, again, it's all transparent to your plugin, but it could be persisted. If it's configuration data, it will be persisted. If it's operational data, it will not be persisted. And in a cluster deployment, it will be replicated, and you can access it from any node as well. So the tools we would be using, this is the lingua franca of OpenDaylight development. And so all you need really is just a text editor, but any IDE like IntelliJ or Eclipse is going to make your life a little easier. And in the OVA, you have both, so you can take your pick and use the IDE you are comfortable with. We are going to be using Yang as the modeling language. What does that mean? So when a plugin has an interface that it exposes to the rest of the world, that's how we are going to describe it, whether they are the data structures that you are making available, or the functions you are making available, or the notifications your plugin is going to generate, all this will be described in Yang, and Ed is going to give you a kind of an overview or a primer on that as well. So Java, either 1.7 or 1.8 will work. Maven is the build tool, and like I said, OSGI and Karaf as well. So what are the benefits with Karaf? So very powerful kind of hot deployment. The controller could be up, and you could be deploying a new plugin without initializing the controller. They're very powerful